Talking about history in India, she has been invaded over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Only invaded. We've never invaded anybody else. She's not had the time. India's like, just give me a break. The Portuguese, the British, the Mughals, like from back in time. And the history of India, I mean, I'm not a historian and I don't claim to be, but I find it really fascinating. I love culture, and especially the culture of India. Like, you will see my grandmother was Catholic because she was raised in a part of India which was colonized, and a lot of people, with Kerala, a lot of people were converted into Catholicism. And she grew up Catholic, and, she followed it for a really long time in her life. India is like hyper diverse because of how many people have kind of made it her roots. So when you go to India, the amount of diversity you will see, the range of people that you will meet is impossible to fathom. Like, an Indian face does not look like a particular person. Or the amount of cultures, the languages. We have written and spoken languages which are almost like 20-something or in their 30s. Absolutely different alphabet, absolutely different sound. If I go to another state, I won't be able to understand what people are saying.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow. How many different languages are spoken there?
About 28 to 30. But there are dialects in their hundreds.
Oh, wow.
Don't even get into the dialects. I just speak English and Hindi. Understand a little bit of Punjabi and Marathi, but it's really amazing.
No, but
have you ever been, by the way?
No, I haven't.
Oh, Joe, you have to. You would really, like, you're the kind of guy who likes a deep dive.
Yeah.
You would really lose yourself, I think.
I want to go
way.
just to see it for many things, but just to see that one immense temple that was carved entirely out of stone.
Oh, yeah.
Is one of the great mysteries of archaeology.
But there are quite a few if you go, especially south of India, and the caves. If you go inside the Andaman and Nicobar, like the caves, you'll see from thousands and tens and thousands of years ago illustrations that you're like, how did this happen? How could this temple have been chiseled? Or how could, these stones have been moved at that time?
Right.
It's just, it made me very, very curious about, like, what kind of tools did we have back then?
Well, there's a lot of holes in human history.
Yeah, for sure.
Graham Hancock has a great quote. He says that we are a species with amnesia. And I think that's accurate. And I think when you find some of the great archaeological wonders where people just have decided, oh, they built it this way, and then just let it go. And then other people start looking at it and go, wait a minute, how? How did they do this? Like, when did they do this? Like, what's the historical record of this? Because this is kind of nuts. This seems to indicate, like, a very advanced, sophisticated society.
Yeah, a very advanced civilization. Like, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, along with the Mayans, is the Indus Valley civilization, which is the north of India.
Yeah.
And I just remember studying about it in school, and that's my maximum understanding of that civilization, but also, like, having visited the Indus River, I guess. But I remember, like, the artifacts that were found, and like, if you do a deep dive into how that civilization existed and then how it was erased, and it makes you question, like, there had to be some seriously advanced, like, scientific understanding that was eventually lost as human evolution happened, where we lose a civilization and then comes back again. But it just makes you wonder about early humans and how fascinatingly advanced we would have had to be to do all of that.
100%. Yeah,
without the technology and stuff that we have, I mean...
I think they had technology. I think they had a different technology.
I think so, too.
I think they had to. This one particular temple that I'm talking about, Jamie, do you know the temple I'm talking about? The one insanely massive one that's built into the side of a mountain?
Kalisa Temple.
This is it.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
This is what I meant.
Because the precision involved. First of all, there's no, like, understanding of where the stone went. Like, they moved who knows how many.
How did you take out all of those tons of rocks?
Yes. Like, it's so insane. The precision is spectacular. It's so nuts when you see like videos
How
of people going
huge is
through
that?
it. Immense, absolutely immense, and incredibly
Wow.
precise,
Yeah.
and just carved out of a solid piece of stone.
Like,
The
if you
whole thing is carved out of the mountain.
think about how old that is. Like, this is all BC, before Christ, like thousands
Oh,
and
yeah.
thousands of years
Yeah.
BC. And the history of India, like, hence the diversity. You see, it's one of the oldest civilizations in the world. And then, like, how do you explain that? Look at that image.
So it says it's 12. What does it say? How old did it say it was?
It's
Jim?
1200, but that's
1200.
not-
How do they know
BC.
that?
That can't be right.
1,200 years old.
Not even-
See, there's a lot of just estimates based on what was the civilization at the time.
Yeah.
And there's no, like, this is the thing with Peru, like Sacsayhuaman and a lot of these places where they
Yeah.
attribute it to the Incas. But you see, like, traditional Inca structures on top of these immense stones that are 100 tons. They're carved in these weird jigsaw patterns as to absorb the energy if there's an earthquake.
Wow.
Like, it's weird shit. And it's like, okay, well, who did that? So, like, oh, the Incas did it. Like, how? How'd they do that? Because all their other structures are smaller
Different.
stones stacked on top of each other in a way that, like, you could see a person carrying them and cutting
Yeah.
them. Makes sense. But there's a lot of stuff like that temple. Like, explain to me
Yeah.
what you used.
There's no explanation.
Like, how? Like, just
How did you
metal?
get-
You just use metal and carve that out like that?
And, like, just a chisel and human.
And if you fuck up once, it's
Yeah.
over. Because you're not putting things on top of things. Like, oh, this block sucks. Let's get a new block. No, you're
Do
carving.
you change the design if there's a fuck up? Like, you know what I mean? If you're trying to
That's a good
build
question.
like a human form and you chisel off the nose, like,
Right.
do you turn it into something else? I don't know. Probably. Otherwise, because it's just one piece, and you're right, you're not adding
Yeah.
anything to it.
Well, in Egypt, there's indications that they abandoned certain pieces because they cracked. Because when you're dealing with, granite, and
Yeah.
there's certain, specifically, there's a gigantic obelisk that they were carving out. That, I mean, I think it was like 1,300 tons, like something bananas. Like, okay, how are you going to move this fucking thing? But they got to a certain point where there was a crack in it, and so they had to abandon it. And so it's
And
still
it's
there.
just there?
Yeah, it's still. I think that's in. It might be in Aswan. I'm not sure where it is. But
Do you know, like, the theories around the Egyptian pyramids, obviously? Like, how were those blocks carried up?
there's
and
no valid theory.
How
Zero.
was it in that shape and so precisely geometrically,
Well, it's even more complicated now because there's an Italian scientist that we had on recently called
Mm-hmm.
Filippo Biondi. Am I saying it right? Biondi? He's amazing accent, this guy. He's fucking incredible. But he's using, what is it, radio Doppler tomography. So
Wow.
it's a type of satellite imagery that uses some technology to get a vision of what's under the ground. And they've used this successfully to show known caverns in the ground and known pyramids. And they even used it in Italy to show that they can look through a 1.2 kilometer mountain and see underneath it this particle collider and have an exact dimension of the particle collider and see what
Wow.
the outlet. So they used this on the pyramids and they
And?
found these immense structures under the pyramids that go over a kilometer into the ground with massive, these huge 20 meter diameter columns that have these huge circular coils wrapped around them. No one knows what the hell they're looking at, but they're in very precise positions. They've done over 200 scans of these things. They don't know what they are. They don't know what's the purpose of all this, who made this.
Wow.
So if this turns out to be accurate, and they're very confident that it's accurate, and they're starting to look into it deeper, and they're trying to figure out how to get down in there and explore with drones or something. Then the whole thing gets thrown into question because it's preposterous enough that you have someone who's able to cut and place 2,300,000 stones that's
Right.
perfectly aligned, a true north, south, east, and west. Some of them weigh as much as 80 tons.
Tons, which is insane.
They come from 500 miles away through the mountains, no roads. Like, how'd you do it? That's crazy.
That's crazy in
but
itself.
if there's structures underneath that go a kilometer into the ground And like there's a giant, like a huge square at the bottom. They don't know what it is, but these are structures. These are not like something that is just a naturally occurring stone.
Yeah, it was man-made. And
Show her an image of it. It's fucking kooky.
so what is that like? How
So these are these columns. This is like what the images are showing you, and the three-dimensional
wild.
replication of what they think is. That's what they think it looks like underneath there. They have no idea what these things are.
what?
There's also, is that Hawara that has that underground labyrinth? They've also found these. Herodotus wrote about these labyrinths. There's a great channel on YouTube called Uncharted X by this guy Ben Van Kerkwyk, who's been on the podcast before. He's great, and they've used radio. They used ground penetrating radar in that location. They found that these immense labyrinths are real. They're there. They're huge. Herodotus said it's greater than Giza, and it's underground. And in the center of one of these atriums, there is a 40-meter metallic object that's shaped like a tic tac. It's in the center of this. Yes. So there's a bunch of shit that they can't explain down there. Where you're like, okay, what is this? They also know that a lot of these civilizations, like later versions of it, took from some of the older sites and started building new things or built on top of them, like very disrespectfully. But nobody had an idea of like the importance of history back then. You're just trying to stay alive. And so they found all these stones. Let's use these stones. And
Oh my gosh, totally. In India, like when we were colonized, you hear stories of, the British officers telling like little kids that, hey, I'll give you £2, go and get the gold statue from this temple or whatever. And you don't have comprehension of what the value of historical things were, that there was so much that was taken from India in terms of wealth and history and historical artifacts, and the Kohinoor diamond, which is still on the Queen's crown, which came from India. And like so many things.
the Queen of England?
Yeah.
She has a diamond on her crown that she stole from
Pull it up. Kohinoor diamond. Kohino.
Give it back.
Yeah, we've been asking for it for a minute. We have. It's
Well, the whole history of England and India is nuts too.
Look at
That's
that
the
diamond.
diamond.
Yeah.
Whoa! How big
the
is that
crown
sucker?
of the Queen.
How
Isn't that
big is that
crazy?
thing?
How big would that be?
Whoa! What is
Yeah.
that worth? What's 100? Well, besides the historical value of it, which is probably priceless, what is 105 carats worth? That's nuts.
A couple
Imagine
of
walking
million,
around with a
couple of
rock like
hundred
that in your
million.
hand.
Yeah.
Woo!
I mean, that's what I'm saying. The royalty in India had so much jewelry and wealth and stuff that was pillaged and just
Yeah.
taken.
Well, the history of India is fascinating. Like in the Vedic texts and the descriptions of Vimanas. Have you ever read any of that stuff?
Yeah, the Vedas.
Yeah.
Not extensively, but clearly you have.
The Vimanas it's like, what are you talking about? You're talking about flying crafts?
Yeah.
Like, what do you...
That's the thing. You go, if you do a deep dive into the mythology of India and the stories that come from there, the kind of technology that has been mentioned in these ancient texts, like the Vimanas you're saying, you have flying objects, you have spears with some sort of energy, you have bows and arrows with some sort of energy that travels beyond time and light. And there's so much of all of this stuff referenced back then, which maybe humans thought was magic, but was some form of ancient technology, like who's to say? But we do definitely believe in Indian mythology, if you go back into Hinduism and the incredible stories that exist. Like, I love to think about where the origin, like where it must have come from.
Yeah.
But there's so many fascinating stories from then.
Yeah, I have an opinion that most people that were writing things down back then were trying to document a truth.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think they were trying to make up stories.
No, I think it was definitely their truth.
Yeah.
But from our perspective now, we have to be like, how do you break down the truth of, that there was this light that arrived from miles and miles away, and it felt like, I don't know, was it a bomb? Like, what was it?
Right.
What was it of that time?
Right.
So it's cool to kind of try and interpret that. I mean, I believe in the mysticism and the magic of ancient humans and, the beginning of time. There's no way to explain what and how that was. We have the information we do from religious texts and historians of the past, but it's just really fascinating to think about how resilient and human beings have been and how evolutions have had the same problems over time, but we kind of just navigate it through different worlds,
As Graham Hancock always says, shit just keeps getting older. And now they just push back the use of fire by 300,000 plus years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it just keeps going. It's not going forward.
No.
It's going backwards.
And anatomically modern humans, I think, have got much further back now in time. They're looking at 800,000 years.
Yes, plus.
And so, plus,
possibly even 1 million.
Right.
This is what weirds me out about these creatures. Like, human beings have gotten to the point multiple times where we were almost extinct. The Toba volcano, I think we got down to... God, was it 7,000 people? Is that like the low estimate?
Damn, really?
Yeah. It's a crazy story. Like, super volcanoes are unbelievably devastating to just all life, because it just changes the temperature of the earth, the entire surface, whatever doesn't get blasted out of the ground by the actual volcano itself. All the other stuff on the other side of the world gets fucked. Like, it just ruins everything. We got down to like a few thousand people. And then there was another time where one of these guys who came, God, I forgot who that was as well. We were talking about the reality of glaciation and about what happens during ice ages and how devastating it can be. And they were saying that we had gotten at least multiple times in the history of the Earth to the point where it was incapable of sustaining life.
Wow.
That within a few... like whatever parts per million of carbon dioxide are necessary to support plant life, we literally got to the part where there was almost impossible to support life. And then it rebounded and everything's fine. So there's so much we don't know.
Absolutely,
this is
man.
So crazy to try to pretend that people 600 years ago make this. Because we know people 600 years ago lived there. We have a lot of archaeological evidence, and we have... But you have weird structures on top of obviously much more intricate and complex structures.
Yeah, and again, they share the same signatures as places like in Egypt and India.
This up, they think you're a kook.
Yeah, they do. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. It's adherence to a status quo, and you get channeled through a very kind of fine wall in academia, and I think that it can be a real detriment actually to opening up your ideas and being a little bit more expansive with what could be possible, because you do get put into a very restrictive format in the traditional academic sense. And then obviously you have the pressures of funding and things like this, and you're not going to get the funding if you're talking about this crazy shit, and it's just like a self-fulfilling censoring, but
it's
with
really
the rise of alternative media, we're changing the game a bit, because you can actually put a voice out there. You can put an idea out there. It's not completely stonewalled by the academic circle. They can't actually prevent people from discussing these ideas in an open media format like this.
Right. And if you put a video like you did on X or on YouTube, people can, like the video that you did on the aliens, whatever they are. People can see the CT scans.
Exactly.
You see the CT scans, and you're automatically go, wait a minute, this is 1,200 years old?
Yeah, you're
So
right.
you're telling me someone faked this 1,200 years ago? Like, I don't think they could fake that now. You'd have to get,
I don't think they could.
Hollywood special effects guys, but then the composition of the actual the bones and everything,
I said, like cartilage and muscle tissue and
how would you fake that?
Circling back, I texted Jesse to ask him for some insight on what you asked for.
Yeah.
So what he sent me was a screenshot of a book where he got it from.
Thanks for this,
I had to
Jamie.
translate. Translation here shows
science of insemination.
Yeah, Jumana, I guess, was the local word.
I
So
told
it's a
you,
local
bro.
word for what that area is called.
Right.
And this is a book he found from that area, I think, and it says, Laboratory of Insemination and Cloning.
What?
That's what I'm saying,
and look
dude.
at all these terms. They use
what it could
yuma,
mean.
isosemen, verb to inseminate, umage, the science of insemination, umapage, wise inseminator, scion or clone.
This is what I'm saying, bro.
Jume, to clone. Jumaj, the science of cloning, and Jumpaj, wise cloner.
So basically,
What the fuck, man?
you know, it's there. It's interesting, and then obviously
Go back to that, please, again.
you get alongside this kind of description, you have these bodies, you have this
Bro, this
megalithic
is
architecture.
mad.
Yeah, like this was, dude, this was like one little 10-second clip in his documentary, and it just made me perk up. Like, wait a minute, what?
The name of the place is like a laboratory of insemination and cloning.
And
then,
you're getting a smorgasbord of different beings coming out of this area, right? Like,
what?
Jesse does add, I think he's speculating somewhat on the etymology, not definitive. But
Oh, of course.
right. But yeah, I mean, it's there.
That's
and
why
it's,
Jesse's better at this than me. I'm like, it's clear. Oh, it's done. It's settled. It's there. Wow,
but
that
it is
so
interesting.
nuts.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I think it does, leads into what was happening on this planet a long time ago.
It doesn't. It leads to, like, my point was when I was getting to the whole super volcano thing.
Yeah.
What if something happened that wiped that species out?
Right.
Like, clearly there's no more Neanderthals, right? Whatever happened, whether it was us or disease or whatever killed them off, they don't exist anymore. We only have evidence of people interbred with them. What is that thing? Is that thing maybe one of us, like another kind of human? Look, another kind of primate. Look how different we are than rhesus monkeys, right? Like, we're all primates. We're so fucking different. Why would we assume that the ones that we found so far, including, like, would they find Denisovans like 15 years ago or something like that?
Right.
And then Homo juliens, what was that one? That was
I don't
just a
know.
few years ago. Like, they keep finding these new versions of people. Not new, obviously.
No.
But long extinct versions of people.
I think it's possible, and I also think that there's a potential.
How'd you get those stones that are that big up so high?
Oh man, there's so much about the pyramids in general that are just so hard to even, like I'd mentioned a little bit last time we talked, the squaring of it is so, it's like 756 feet long, and there's like 2 to 3 inch variation on at the most. So you're talking like thousandths of a percent on this massive thing, and then if you just stretch a rope from one end of this table to the other and hold it tight, it's going to sag a little. You're 756 feet. You're not getting a 2-inch accurate measurement at that
With a rope.
With the
Right.
rope, so you have to use something different.
Yeah. So what are you using?
Yeah, exactly.
What are you using? How are you using it? How do you get 2,300,000 stones all placed within 20 years?
The 20 years, yeah.
The 20-year thing is nuts.
Just throw that one out, because that's the cynical side of things. That's where they are. We have to stick to what we know, what we believe. It's like just a couple pharaohs before that guy built 3 pyramids. So you can't just say, well, these guys were only building them each generation for tombs. It seems to me like it's a multi-generational project. If these guys were the ones that built them, like the historians say, it seems to me like every generation was working on 3. I break ground on my grandsons. I'm getting my sons going, and I'm finishing mine. Every generation was probably doing that, because these things probably took 100 years to build, man. They're huge.
Yeah, the only explanation outside of that, it was some lost technology.
Yes.
That's the only explanation. Yeah. The problem with the lost technology thing is, where's the tools? Like, what would you use? There is some evidence that there's some sophisticated cutting methods, the coring, the drills that indicate like a very high-speed drill, which is interesting. So it's not just as simple as getting some tube and slowly working its way through. The way it's cut into some of the granite indicates that it was done at a high speed. So the question is like, how, what was the material, where is it, what happened to it?
And you like. The argument, of course, would be this is the kind of stuff that would get looted right away, right? If you watch Mad Max, they're not running around picking up bottle caps; they're picking up the stuff you can use. But on the flip side of that, the evidence. If you look at any one of your videos or mine that are about the pyramids, you're going to have thousands of comments of people that are like, here's my theory on the pyramids.
Right.
And most of these are pretty mundane. Most of these are, I think they might have used water to,
Right.
I think, we kind of need to exhaust, in my mind, all that mundane shit that people can throw at this problem before we really can start saying, okay, now let's just step outside of history and speculate harder. I'm willing to entertain the things, but if you really want to find out what happened, in my mind, you kind of have to be more grounded with it. That's how I look at it.
Well, I think if we're looking at a linear timeline between the technology that was available to people, say, 15,000 years ago and today, then you have to look at it in a more mundane way, because Obviously, they didn't have electricity then. You're thinking, obviously, they didn't have diamond-tipped cutting tools that were made out of like some super titanium or whatever the fuck the alloy was. But if we're looking at lost technology, and if we're looking at the possibility of, when you get into Graham Hancock stuff, specifically the Younger Dryas impact theory, which I'm always fascinated by both the people that fully support it and the people that fully dismiss it. Both of those things are interesting to me because you don't know. Just stop.
Thank you.
Just stop.
Thank you. That's
shut your hole.
so accurate right there.
Shut your hole. We're all just guessing.
Yeah.
We're guessing, but we're all looking at some really interesting stuff, right? We're looking at the iridium. We're looking at the micro diamonds, the nano diamonds. We're looking at the
black mat.
Yeah. Do you know about my friend John Reeves up in Alaska? The boneyard in Alaska?
No, I don't.
John Reeves, he found this. This was actually sawed. That's an ancient mammoth bone.
Oh,
The piece that was cut out was how it was carbon dated, and I forget what the carbon date it was. It wasn't that extraordinary. Hundreds of years, I think, right? It was only hundreds of years, right? Or maybe a couple thousand. I forget what it was. But the fact that it was sawed at the top is very interesting because they were trying to. Some of the bones they've dated to tens of thousands of years, including animals that they've found bones of that weren't even supposed to be in this area. So he has a very small piece of. He has an enormous piece of land, but a small piece of it. I think it's only about 6 acres where they're finding an enormous number of woolly mammoth bones. Short-faced bear, all these different lions, and all these different animals that some of them they didn't even think were in Alaska 10, 15,000 years ago. And there's also a thick layer of dark carbon that indicates that like something happened, like there was some sort of massive burn. And the theory is that there was an enormous flood and that this was a basin where a lot of these animals that died got washed into and then covered. So they have this wall that is essentially permafrost, and they hose it down. They do it all the time, and then they see a mammoth tusk, and then they slowly work their way out.
Okay.
But he has go to his Instagram page. John was every year he's our last guest, but this year he got pneumonia.
Oh, that's
so
too
we
bad.
had to delay him until recently. But this is all stuff that they find. He's a gold miner. So this is all stuff that they find
Incidentally.
on his property. Well, it started out incidentally, and now they search for it. But that's John right there in the middle with the baseball hat on. So the big guy right there, he's a giant human.
I see.
So, I mean, you got to see him in real life. He's huge. But this area that he has is extraordinary because he's got enormous. See, that's how they hose it all down. So he's set up this multi-million-dollar research facility out there. He's got huge warehouses stored and thousands of these bones.
Wow.
And it's just in a 6-acre area. And then there's
Wow.
another additional area that's a similar size. So there you can see one of the bones, one of the tusks sticking out. But he gave us that a steppe bison skull that's in the lobby. I don't know if you saw that. That's 10,000 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. And so he's got a bunch of, he pulls them out left and right. See if you can find like some of the bins that he has. So he's got these enormous, like, look at all those mammoth tusks.
Holy
Just
shit.
stacks of them.
Yeah.
A ton of them. And they're all over the place. I mean, his property is really, really extraordinary.
Wow.
But it's all his.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to dig this stuff up myself. I don't want anybody coming in lying and bullshitting and controlling the area. It's all on private land, so I'm just going to keep pulling the stuff out of there and hiring people to come in and do some research on it.
Yes.
Look at all these bones I found. Isn't that insane?
That's wild.
So that's the theory. The theory is that this was an area where a lot of these animals that died probably instantaneously by the impact got washed into.
And, okay. And I could see that. I mean, he
Yeah.
has a lot of fucking bones there, man.
This is you're only getting a tiny fraction of it. If you
Yeah.
actually see it, Jamie, see if you can find one of the images of his warehouses, like from like there's some overhead views of the warehouses. They're huge. And they're just filled with bones. And he pulls them out every day. Like whenever they want, they go down, they hose down the permafrost. And because it's in the permafrost, it's all preserved.
Yeah. Wow. That's what I was just thinking is permafrost is preserved real well. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are
Jeez.
just,
Low angle. It's just a
yeah.
But
But these
still.
are all storage bins that
Yeah.
they have filled with bones.
Oh,
I mean, it's
man.
pretty extraordinary.
That is wild. Yeah,
So-
that's sad that he doesn't want to bring the scientists in, but I can understand why. It's the way that things are nowadays. It's
He doesn't trust them.
exactly a lot
Yeah.
of people don't.
And he wanted to come on here to like spread it out to the world. One of the things that he found out was that they dumped the previous owners of his property before he owned it. The what museum was it again, Jamie? American National History Museum in New York City had acquired some of the bones, and they had so much of them that they dumped some of them in the East River. Now, they denied it, so he sent divers out to the exact spot in the East River, and they started pulling up steppe bison bones and all these different
Wow.
ancient animal bones from this exact area where they said to look for it. So it's pretty much been confirmed that it's true, and he does know that they have some of them still, and they won't release them to him. So until they release the bones to him that are rightfully his, he's like, fuck off.
Yeah.
You can't come here.
I can understand that.
But his spot, in my opinion, is one of the best indicators that there was a mass casualty event. There was some sort of a huge catastrophe that took place that killed all of these animals. Now, we know that humans were around back then. The question was, how sophisticated were they? And this is where it all gets so weird, because I've been following this forever and ever and ever. And I was following it long before they discovered Göbekli Tepe.
No.
And so the question was that the archaeologists would always, the really arrogant archaeologists, would always throw in the faces of these heretics. They would say, well, if this is true, where's the evidence of this ancient civilization that was so sophisticated they can make massive stone structures 10,000 years ago? There is no evidence.
Yep.
Well, now there is.
Yeah.
So now they have to kind of look at it and go, well, okay, we were wrong about that, but we know 2,500 BC maximum. That's how old the pyramids are.
They don't. A lot of the scientists, most of the scientists are actually scientists, but the ones that we end up seeing are the ones that are invested in creating a narrative. They're the ones that they want to make sure that pseudo-archaeology and pseudoscience is always on its back foot and never gets a fair day in court.
Is there any evidence that there was other species of human beings that existed in the Americas? Like we're finding in Russia, and there's many of them that are being discovered all over the world now, these subspecies of
Yes.
human beings.
Yeah. This is an issue that I go into in America before. And what first drew me into it was Denisova Cave in Siberia. I think everybody's heard of the Neanderthals, and these days I think everybody's heard of the Denisovans as well.
A lot of people haven't.
I guess a lot of people haven't. But first of all, let's take the Neanderthals.
Okay.
For a long time, it was held that the Neanderthals were stupid, primitive subhumans, shambling, lacking symbolism. Turns out that that's not true at all. The latest scientific evidence on the Neanderthals is that they were symbolic creatures, that they did do art, that they were in every sense human, and they were in every sense human because anatomically modern humans interbred with Neanderthals. You can't interbreed with another species. They clearly were human beings, but they looked rather different from us. And that's why certain populations in the world today still have 3 to 5% of Neanderthal DNA. Then in Russia, in Denisova Cave, they find a single pinky bone from a little finger. And they do the DNA testing on it. They're able to get a complete genome from it. And what they discover is this isn't a Neanderthal. This isn't an anatomically modern human being. This is another human species who they named the Denisovans. They think they're more closely related to Neanderthals than they are to anatomically modern humans, but they're clearly another human species. And they also interbred with anatomically modern humans. And Denisovan DNA survives, interestingly enough. It survives predominantly in Australasia, in Papua New Guinea and amongst Australian Aborigines. So as part of the research for this book, I went to Denisova Cave. I had an amazing, actually just incredible trip to Russia. I hadn't expected it to be like that at all. Siberia, I mean, America is vast, but my God, crossing Siberia, this is endless rolling plains, this just vast area.
How did you cross it?
We took a car. You can't travel independently in Russia. It's very difficult. You have to get permission, and you have to state in advance where you're going to be stopping off at. So what I found, and I just did so through the internet, was a local guy called Sergei Kurgin, who had a little tour business in Siberia, in the city of Novosibirsk. I got in touch with him. He found a translator who would translate my emails, and I said, we want to make this journey to Denisova Cave. And can you set this up for us and get all the permissions? And he did. And so we flew into Novosibirsk. Sergei and his translator, who turned out to be a Russian student who spoke good English, joined us. And we did this immense journey across Siberia.
How long did it take?
Oh, it took us 3 days to get to Denisova Cave. 3 days
driving every day?
3 days of driving every day. Some stopping off along the way. Incredible hospitality of the Russians that we were amongst. Very independent people who are living out there in the wilderness and who actually do know how to survive. It's the first time I've ever drunk milk fresh from the cow. Literally milked right out of the cow and poured down my throat.
How was it?
It was delicious. And the cream, I mean, thick cream. Very, so there was a lot of things about Russia that surprised me. Denisova Cave is a fascinating, beautiful place to visit. It's another example of a missing chapter in the human story that is beginning to be pieced together. It's obvious now that we were not alone, that there were multiple other human species who were human enough to interbreed with us and leave DNA.
And this Denisovan species was only discovered in, like, was it 2000 something?
Very recently, the 2000s.
Or something.
It's a very recent discovery. And
did they leave behind art? Did they leave behind art?
Better than that, they left behind certain physical objects which are extremely hard to explain. One of them is a green stone bracelet. And that bracelet is in the form of a torque, which was therefore slipped on sideways onto the hand. It's not a full ring. And a hole has been drilled through the bracelet, and from that hole it's been possible to reconstruct that a pendant was hung. Then the archaeologists started to take a look in detail at the drill marks on that hole, and what they discovered was a huge anomaly, that was drilled with a stable, fixed drill, and it was drilled at extremely high speed. This is thought to be 40 or 50,000 years old. There is not supposed to have been any such technology in that period that was capable of drilling with a stable fixed drill, and yet there it is, and there it appears. So there are also incredible, very fine needles, bone needles that the Denisovans made, very long ones, which suggest that they were stitching very heavy stuff together. And the suggestion has been, were they making skin boats, for example, to use to navigate? That would explain how they managed to get themselves to Australia, which is where the largest amount of Denisovan DNA survives today. There's one of those needles. So there are indications of strangely out of place technology amongst the Denisovans, which is 20, 30,000 years earlier in the human story than it should be. Those kind of needles, that kind of bracelet, you could expect to find them in what archaeologists call the Neolithic, but to find it in the Paleolithic is very puzzling and very odd, and it suggests that the Denisovans were certainly not shambling subhumans, that they were refined creatures.
Can you find out what year they discovered the Denisovans, Jamie? Can you Google that real quick? I want to say it's in the 2000s, but I mean, imagine that human beings have been around for this long. Here we are in 2019, and within the last decade or so, they figured this out.
Yeah, we're discovering new stuff about ourselves. We're discovering that our story is much richer, much more textured, much more layered than we thought it was. It's not a simple story. It's a very complicated story, and we ourselves are a hybrid species. We are the result of interactions with all kinds of different looking human beings, and the end result is ourselves. So it's not just that we carry Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA. In a sense, we are Neanderthals and Denisovans, and they are part of the anatomically modern human heritage. So you make a good point. The fact that this is only being discovered now, and that it's an incredibly important, I mean, it completely rewrites the story of our ancestry. The notion.
Says the 1970s.
1970s.
Okay, I'm way off.
The real work that's been done in Denisova Cave has been done in the 2000s, from 2006, 2007 onwards.
Genetic examinations.
That's when the major papers have been
2008.
Been published.
Yeah.
Which have revealed the genome of the Denisovans and revealed the Denisovan connection to anatomically modern humans. The fact that we're only finding this out now, that we told told the story of our past and weren't aware of this raises the question, how much else in the story of our past is there that we're not aware of? Let's stop being so arrogant, so sure of ourselves, so confident in our findings. Let's be more tentative. Let's keep an open mind and see where it takes us. That's the main message that I have from all of this. And I think, and I hope that this will be an effect of this book. I'm not kidding myself that the archaeologists are going to jump on board overnight, particularly so since I'm very critical of American archaeology in this book. And I'm critical of it specifically and explicitly because of the dominance of the Clovis first model for so long, which prevented other research taking place.
This is a good way to segue into like what you do, and because these subjects, so many of these subjects, so many people have like an instantaneous reaction.
Yeah.
And that instantaneous reaction is, oh, hogwash.
Yeah.
If this was true, I would already know about it. It would be taught in universities.
Yep.
It would all be. But then you find out, like, no one is really just kind of trying to piece stuff together, specifically talking about these ancient tablets, which are, to me, some of the most interesting things about ancient history, particularly what came out of ancient Sumer.
Yeah.
Ancient Sumer, when you look at their tablets and, like, what are they saying? And why would they dedicate so much time to talking about this stuff?
Exactly.
Why do they have pictures of giant, enormous people-looking things with like a humanoid with a tail sitting on their lap? Like, what is this? Just fiction?
Yeah.
Like, why would they detail this? And how do they have a representation of the solar system with the correct amount of planets and relatively the correct order and size? You know, it's not exact, but it's an artistic version of the real thing.
Yeah.
And how the hell 6,000, 5,000 years ago do they know that?
Yeah.
And what explanations do we have? Like, what's the conventional explanations when people tried to dismiss what they knew in ancient Sumer?
Well, the conventional explanation is always going to the term mythology. They
Right.
throw mythology around, left and right to cover up the fact that they have no clue or idea. So they turn it into mythology so they can kind of say it's all fantasy and fairy tales, and this is how they express themselves or how they understood the universe. It's all mythology. It's all fake. But in reality, it's not all fake. These people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now.
When you look at these ancient languages like cuneiform, can you read that? Do you know how to read it?
Yeah, a small amount of it, yeah. Studying
How
it
does it
from
work?
books that I have bought right off of Amazon.
Oh.
Yeah, so basically you take a stick. It looks like a stick with a kind of a curved end, right? Almost sharpened. It's called a stylus. And then
Just like a stylus for an iPad.
Exactly, very similar, right? And then you take a piece of wet clay, and right before it's too wet or too dry, right in the middle stage, you then start wedging, making these incredible lines into the clay, and then from that you get this cuneiform text. So this text, literally, some of the letters actually relate to complete ideas. But it's incredible work, and it takes a long time to do. And then you have to let this thing dry, and then it becomes stone. So, if people were supposed to be trying to worry about how they're going to get their next meal, shelter for the night, and all these kind of things, who has time to sit down and write these incredible works of art like the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example?
Yeah.
So I think they really were writing down, and also they were transcribing information that was given to them by these quote-unquote gods with a lowercase g.
So when you're reading things like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for people who don't know, is one of the oldest versions of a lot of the stories that you hear in the Bible. Very similar to them. There always seems to be a great flood. There's a few heroes. There's angry gods. There's a bunch of stuff going on. And Zecharia Sitchin's work was like the most controversial on the Sumerian text, right?
Yes.
Because there's a whole website called sitchiniswrong.com. Like, people go crazy about him.
Yeah.
But when he starts talking about it, when you read some of the things that they wrote, and when you see like some of the images that they created, the images that look like the double helix from DNA, and there's a bunch of the like that now we represent the caduceus, which represents pharmacies and drugs. Like that's the old version of an image of the double helix of DNA, or at least it looks super similar to that.
Oh, it definitely is, because it's referenced even in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and other ancient texts. So there's no coincidences here. Now, Zecharia Sitchin, I don't particularly go by his work. Not because it's controversial. I believe he was one of the greatest researchers of all time. And the reason why is because he laid out so much information for us to begin to scratch our head and ask questions. But what I figured out was that by going through the UCLA CDLI online cuneiform digital library, say that fast 10 times, I was able to take stone tablets and decipher them myself. So anyone can go online to the UCLA CDLI online cuneiform digital library and read these stone tablets for themselves. You don't need Zecharia Sitchin. You don't need anyone else. And as I began to break these tablets down,
do they have them transcribed, or are you reading the actual tablet?
They transcribe them. They actually transcribe them into English for you.
Is there controversy as far as, like, are there different versions of the transcription? Like, do some people think it's interpreted differently? Is like some debate about that?
Only where it comes to where some of the text is missing. There could be pieces chipped off of tablets. Right. You see that corner missing from that tablet right there in the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Just look how wild is that?
Yeah.
Just how wild is that exists? Yeah. And that this was... It's so hard for people to put in their brain 5,000 years of time, and that there's these people that have this very bizarre language. Like when you look at that language, we don't even know what it sounds like, right?
Right. No, and the language popped up out of nowhere. You're talking about a civilization that appeared out of nothing.
It looks like computer code.
It does.
Doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Just imagine like a human being deciding that they were going to write down in these very bizarre, and they all agreed that all these things mean a certain thing. So they had to somehow or another have a Rosetta Stone or something where they're documenting it so that people can learn it and teach it. And then we're looking at it 5,000 years later.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
It is. And what's incredible is this text was translated in the 1800s, long before Zecharia Sitchin was born. So there are some rumors that, he was the only one that could decipher these tablets. Well, no. George Smith, who worked as an Assyriologist and wrote many books and deciphered these Sumerian tablets in the 1800s. So we're talking about texts that have been deciphered for a few hundred years, nothing that was just deciphered recently.
So what are the first decipherings? Like what year was the first deciphering?
It was in 1800. I think around 1850. George Smith. He actually worked at the I believe it was Cambridge.
What was his take? Like, when he's reading all these wacky stories and all the Anunnaki stuff? Like, what's his take on it?
He is literally subscribing to this information the way almost that you and I see it today. These people saw something, experienced something, interacted with something, and he cataloged it, and it inspired him to write a complete translation of the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. And he talks about the fact that information was copied right from those tablets and put into the Old Testament of the Bible. And so, not exactly like it's going to go from here to the Bible, but it went to other ancient papyruses and scriptures and so forth. And then later on, when it was discovered in caves, people took those and then said, okay, we got to put this into a book. And then it became the Bible much later, around 100 AD. But he subscribed to the theory that these people interacted with beings in some way, shape, or form, and that also this information is so incredible that it became part of the biblical text.
Did you ever read the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Yes, yeah.
So the Dead Sea Scrolls, what was it found in? What year was that? It was in Qumran, right? They found them in
Qumran, but I think again this was also, I believe, in the late 1800s or early 1900s.
Is when they found them. So these things are written on animal skins, and this is this is a very old version of those exact same stories, or some of similar stories.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weirdness in the Dead Sea Scrolls. I haven't read it, but is there any references to anything that's similar, like Anunnaki-type characters, the Nephilim, or anything like that in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
They show up everywhere. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Enuma Elish, and the Epic of Atrahasis. Of course, even in the Bible, they're known as the Anak, A-N-A-K. We were grasshoppers in their eyesight, it says in the biblical text. So no matter where you go in any culture, you're going to discover that these beings, in some way, shape, or form, engaged mankind, brought knowledge, teaching, building techniques, and just so much more wisdom and information, esoteric wisdom, alchemy, all these things came from these people.
So the craziest version of this story is that they genetically engineered us out of lower primates and put us here to mine gold.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then established different types of civilizations and taught us how to build things, taught us all these different things. And enough time has passed that we've kind of forgotten. Mm-hmm. Enough time has passed. That's the wackiest version of it, right?
Right. That's the bare bones minimum.
Yeah, the wackiest version is that they made us, which is we've talked about this a couple of times, but how bizarre it is that human beings have this incredible fascination for gold. Mm-hmm. We're fascinated with gold. Yeah. This fascination with gold is really weird. Mm-hmm. Like, why back when it was basically useless? You couldn't make a knife out of it. You couldn't, like it didn't make sense that this would be so valuable. Just because it's rare, you're barely alive. We're going, right? We're going back to full-on hunter and gatherer, our ancestors with spears and stone chipped, and then after that, gold emerges, and it stays. Yeah. It stays forever. Yeah. Now, when you read Zecharia Sitchin's book, he talks about this in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. His description of it was that they needed to suspend gold particles in the atmosphere because their atmosphere was being destroyed.
Right.
Then you move to like somewhere around the 2000s when climate scientists start proposing this idea of suspending reflective particles in the atmosphere.
Right.
And then when you realize the unique properties of gold, how unusual it is in terms of like a building material, you can coat things. The reason why things are like coated in gold, silver plated, or gold plated rather, you can take a tiny piece of gold and cover an enormous area with it. It's a strange metal, like really weird. And what, the supposed story is, it's very common on Earth, very rare on Nibiru.
Right. Yeah, that's the story. And now when I started looking into this gold thing myself, and here's what I came up with. So when you start analyzing the text, you discover that there was an encampment in a place called South Africa at Adam's Calendar. Okay. Now, at Adam's Calendar, there's actually the very first gold mines discovered. They're dating them back to about 200,000 years ago. And that's incredible because there's a building there that looks like a worn down structure. Now, in the tablets, it talks about the fact that the Ijiji, who were the working class Anunnaki beings who were cleaning out the Euphrates and Tigris River so they can create irrigation and create a bustling civilization. Also, they were doing the actual construction themselves. No people needed, just them working. They were like the construction workers, and Anu and Enki and Enlil, these leader gods, were like the foremen, the master architects and so forth, right? The boss. So these people were working, but they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were volunteers. They got tired of doing the work, according to them, for about 250,000 years of labor on Earth, and also, according to them, on Mars. This is in the text. They call it Lamu. And so they decided to go to war against Enki and Enlil and Anu because their demands had not been met. So they went to meet them in the Epic of Atrahasis. They go to Adam's Calendar. They go to that same structure that was discovered where that gold mine is located. I was like, holy crap, there is some link here to gold. Specifically, exactly, I don't know. But I know if you're an advanced civilization, you need gold. And the people that you have working it for you probably think, it's to adorn or to adorn yourself or in recognition of the gods. So they'll wear it and they'll utilize it, but not for technology. But what's crazy is they go to war, they get ready to go to battle, and then Enki says, I have an idea that will stop this war. There's an existing being on this planet. Existing, not something that doesn't exist, existing. We can add our essence to it, but a slain god. So they're talking about taking the DNA or genetics from one of themselves and mixing it with the DNA of the hominid that was here. It's not specified whether it was, an ape man or anything, but they don't specify in the tablets. But to create a worker being. And they began to do this genetic modification, probably disconnecting some of our DNA, making genetic modifications to us to get us to take orders from them. They inserted something called a worship gene, which was just discovered recently, that human beings have a gene inside of them that can be turned on and turned off. It can be turned off in a laboratory setting. It can also be turned off with a magnetic field around your head. And when it's off, you don't want to worship anything outside of yourself. You look inside. And when it's on, you look to get something from the outside. So this is incredible. And so they made us worship people.
Gene inside of us to make us worship them. Right. How genius.
It's incredible because then you're not a slave anymore. You're doing this for the honor of the gods.
And for people who think all this talk is really crazy, I want to put into perspective that we talked about this the other day, that during which war was it where the Soviet Union was experimenting? It was scientists in the Soviet Union, correct? They're experimenting with creating a chimpanzee human being hybrid that they would probably send to war.
Yeah.
So instead of having regular people, we would make this monster, this freak, ape man, and send him to war and have him crush the enemies.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just how crazy is that? They knew how strong chimps are. I got an idea. Let's turn a chimp human, and that way if he dies, who gives a fuck?
Right.
We made him. Get him to go to work for us.
Yeah.
And now if you're a supremely enlightened being, wouldn't you think of human beings with all of our folly and all of our chaos and all of our war and bullshit and the internet and disinformation and misinformation? Wouldn't you think of us kind of the same way we would think about that chimp hybrid thing?
Yeah.
And the Americas are very mysterious. It's very comparable to Egypt. It was just the amount of questions that haven't been answered is insane. And the Olmec world is fascinating. And so, there's, Graham in Fingerprints of the Gods, he talks about how the Olmecs, he thought that they may have like African features, and of course that was 1995, and so I don't know, 2015 you guys are talking, and he's like, well, I published that then, but DNA research has come out that says that these people don't have African DNA in them, and that maybe this is Polynesian, maybe this is Australasian people intermixing, and that's why they have this unique look, whatever. But in the Olmec world, there's this monument that is actually called El Negro. And you look at it, and it's not an Olmec. It is an African man. And so I post about this on my X account, and I just kind of like list everything I've seen in the Olmec world. And I'm like, this is really fascinating. Maybe this is evidence of Africans who were in the Olmec world. And I hadn't seen this monument before I saw it in person, because you go in the Olmec realm or the region in Mexico, and you go to these museums and you look at the log or the ledger that people have been on, and nobody has visited this museum in the last 4 months, and before that it was 6 months before that, and these monuments just kind of sit underneath these metal roofs, to protect them from the rain, and it's like this completely lost civilization.
Is there an image of this that's available online?
Yeah. There we go. So if you pull up an Olmec head, you'll see that these guys are very different looking, and especially if you can get there we go. Look at okay, so that's so that's a regular Olmec head. So you can see that these are two different races of people. The Olmecs have very soft features, round faces, big eyes, big lips, kind of big noses. They have very soft features. And this El Negro monument has these high cheekbones, this defined jawline, intense.
But isn't there a lot of variety just in, like, let's just say Italians? There's
a
lot of variety.
Absolutely.
So couldn't this just be someone who's on a spectrum of features? I don't think it's that much different than
you don't
the
think
Olmecs.
So? Well,
no. When I'm looking at it, I could imagine, like, there's, like I said, just my nationality, Italian. So there's Italians with very thin faces, and there's these big thick ones, and people vary quite a bit. There's enough similarities that I could say, those could be the same people.
Well, the only counter I give to that is when you visit the Olmec realm, you see a lot more than just the heads. You see a lot of Olmec faces, dozens and dozens and dozens of them, maybe well over 100. And when you've seen them all, and you kind of get a gist of like the way they generally look, this guy will really stand out. Like I took a group of students there, and we all, as soon as we all came in and saw it, based on everything we'd been seeing for the past week, it immediately stood out to us.
Well, certainly the thick brow is unique.
Well,
all the other Olmec are wearing helmets.
And that hair as well. It's kind of that curly hair, and or at least it looks like it to me. And so anyways, he could be Olmec. I don't, my identity is not tied up in what I think this is or is
also,
not.
Olmec could be African, like very, very clearly. Like that one on the left easily could be an African man.
Which one? This guy right here?
This one, the one next to the white one, to the left of that. Yeah, right there. It easily could be an African man.
It certainly does look that way. But I was on a plane to Mexico a couple months ago, and I was going into the Olmec realm, and I was like, I wanted to take a picture of this guy. I'm looking to the left of me, and he was an Olmec man sitting next to me, and he looked like, he didn't look like any Mexican I've ever seen. There's something there with the DNA of the Olmec people that is definitely connected with something else that you don't see if you go to the Maya realm, that you don't see if you go to like Mexico City. They have something in their DNA. They have this very specific look about them, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm like looking, and I'm like, this Olmec guy next to me.
So fascinating, because it clearly could have been African explorers that made it.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Could we look up, look up the Traveler Olmec Monument, if you would, please, Jamie. It's the Traveler. I want to call him, I think he's Monument 13. There's another one called Monument 19 that we should look at. But he's this man that's very clearly not, there we go, top left, the one that's on Reddit. In fact, this might be my post on Reddit. Yes, yes, sir. So this guy right here, all right. So this is really, really fascinating. So let's diagnose this. All right, so flags. Flags are invented, this is very unknown fact. Flags are invented, or the first place that we have evidence for it is along the Nile Valley, on these pre-dynastic pots, which they're not the stone vases, but just like clay pottery. They would make little paintings on them, and people had these river boats that had these flags on them, and the flags would say what city you had come from or what village you had come from. And so flags are an old world thing. We don't have any evidence of flags in the New World. All right, he's also wearing a turban. He's got this big turban that's draping off the back of his head, and he very clearly has this distinct beard that's popping out. Now, Native Americans, sometimes they can, they're Asiatic. They have Asian DNA, and Asians don't really grow typically. Sometimes they'll grow the little stash and a little bit of a beard here, but they don't have that big thick beard that you would see, like in Europe or along the Mediterranean in the Middle East. And so this guy has this big thick beard, and then he's got boots on his feet as well. And we think that these are these glyphs that you see to his left and right. These are really, really early Olmec glyphs, and they interpret that foot to the left as saying that he came from somewhere. He was a traveler. And so the thought here is, so this is around 900 BC, give or take a little bit. They really have no idea when these are made. Like, you go to all the monuments, and it says made somewhere between 1500 BC and 400 BC. And they'll say 1500 BC and 400 BC. And so they really are uncertain about how old a lot of these monuments are.
Make it big again, Jamie, please.
But if we shoot for dead center 900 BC, the Phoenicians out of the Mediterranean are launching these sailing expeditions around the coast of Africa. These are the ancient world's greatest sailors that we know of, and so there were like experimental archaeological or scientific, expeditions done that show if you would send one of these early Iron Age boats, or if you send any ship out of the Gates of Hercules or the Strait of Gibraltar, and you send it out into the Atlantic, and it drifts just a little bit too far without turning south along the African coast, it will be carried by a current across the Atlantic Ocean down into the Bahamas, the Caribbean, and straight into the Gulf of Mexico. And if that had happened, if people who had looked like they're in the old world like this guy, if that had happened, somebody from the old world, the largest civilization at the time, the empire in this area, would have been the Olmecs. And the reason I feel so strongly about that is because we do not have flags, turbans, or boots in the ancient Americas. This guy looks nothing like a Native American, and the flag, turban, and boots are all old world features.
You know what's fascinating to me, too? The image on the lower right of the bird's head looks very similar to the carvings on Göbekli Tepe.
Doesn't it?
Yes,
doesn't it?
Very. The curve of the beak, that's not how birds' beaks look. Like, that's a very distinct style of artwork.
Well, and it's
See if you can find the images of the birds from Göbekli Tepe.
It's this raised relief art style. So people talk about it a lot with Göbekli Tepe. I mean, think about this. This is 11,600 years ago, and you have artisans and stonemasons who have been practicing for so long that now they're able to take a blank piece of stone and carve the face off to reveal the artwork from underneath it. Not carve the artwork into the stone,
Right.
but carve the stone away and reveal this sculpture from underneath. How similar does that look? It's bizarre, right?
Real similar.
And so it's the exact same kind of art style that you see in the Olmec realm.
Exactly, the 3D stone carvings. Instead of carving it directly into the stone, carve the stone around it. They're both doing the same thing. It takes a lot of time.
I mean, how
A lot more
could
effort.
you imagine?
Weird stuff. It's also like the idea that this is documenting time. That the handbags or whatever those things are, what it actually is the sun going over the earth.
You know, I'm writing a paper about this, but this might be a good place to talk about it. So, you know, the handbag mystery is very fascinating. We have them in Assyria. We have them Mesopotamia. As far as I know, I don't think one's been found in Egypt. You can see them on the top of those T-pillars in Göbekli Tepe, and there's one in the Olmec realm. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Monument 19, if we could look that up. I think it's the coolest handbag. And when I saw it in person, I like jumped. I had been
That's
waiting
crazy.
years to see
it's
it.
the same thing?
Olmec Monument 19. So this guy, he's wrapped in. He's sitting in Quetzal.
Whoa.
He's sitting in Quetzalcoatl. Could you do the one at the top left where we get the full picture? There we go. So this stone is probably about this big. It's probably about this big, and it sits on a table like this. So he's sitting inside the feathered serpent, Quetzalcoatl. And so he's sitting inside the feathered serpent, and he's holding this handbag. And I'm not sure. So he has this, and if you see, he has a feathered serpent mask around his head as well. I'm not sure what exactly is above him. There are actually two. It's really hard to make it out, but what's above him, that little box-looking thing, is some kind of box that's being held up by two birds on each end. But the important thing here is the fact that this is the first depiction of the feathered serpent in all of Mesoamerica that we know of, and it might be the oldest handbag known as far as like what we have official dates for. And so the idea here is that he's some kind of sacred shaman, bringer of enlightenment, bringer of knowledge, something like that. And so I had been on the hunt for another handbag. Everywhere I go, I'm always looking for a handbag. I was in Cambodia a couple weeks ago. I'm going around the temples of Angkor Wat, and there's hieroglyphs and carvings all over the walls. I'm looking for a handbag. I can't find one. But when I was in central Mexico, I was at a site called Cacaxtla, and I found another handbag person. I've never officially published it. It's on my X if you'd want to look it up.
What is the timeline for that one?
They don't really know. When you look at the monument, it says anywhere from 1400 BC to 400 BC. That's just what they think. I mean, the Olmec realm is so uncertain, and we don't have hard dates for almost anything. They appear on this historical timeline as a fully fledged civilization capable of creating what you're seeing from the very beginning. Just like so many civilizations, it's like as soon as they arrive as soon as they arrive in the world, they're doing everything to the fullest capacity. And we don't have any evidence in the Olmec realm of them working their way towards being able to do things like this. It's just from the very beginning, they're able to make monuments like this, move these 50-ton Olmec heads. The largest head is this. You'll find this interesting. So there was a nautical engineer that MEC, which is an organization I'm with. It's the Maya Exploration Center. It's run by Dr. Ed Barnhart. I'm a member of it, and one of the guys that worked with us traveled into the Olmec realm. And he's a nautical engineer. He's fascinated with how were the Olmecs moving these huge heads up and down these rivers? So they live in like the rivers, swamps. They have to cross some mountain ranges. How are you getting these heads 90 miles away from the Sierra de la Tuxtla volcanic belt? That's where they're pulling the basalt from. Because we found unfinished heads like at the base of these big basalt quarries. And they're transporting them 90 kilometers away through, like I was saying, rivers and
90
valleys.
miles or kilometers?
I think it's kilometers. It's kilometers as the crow flies. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And so much further when you're actually dealing with the complications of the terrain. And so he was fascinated, like, okay, how do they get them to the river? And then how do they get them on the boat? And then when it's on the boat, how exactly does this work if they're transporting it by boat? And kind of the same mystery in Egypt too, right? Like how do the nuances of these things work? So he devised this algorithm or whatever where you could put in the hypothetical size of your Olmec raft and put in the hypothetical size of an Olmec head into this database or whatever. And when you made a raft that was too big to go down the narrow stretches of the Coetzalcoatl River, which is like the Olmec's Nile River, when the raft was too big and too wide to actually go down the river and you put a 5-ton Olmec head on it, it would sink that raft. But the smallest Olmec head is 6 tons and the largest one is 52 tons. So how are they doing it? And this is something that like all archaeologists have quietly known, this idea of they're just being transported on these simple balsa rafts must be wrong. It's unexplained. How are these things being done? And I just find this realm really fascinating.
Wow. It is. And then do they even know what language they spoke? The
No,
Olmecs?
we don't know what language they spoke. We don't even know what they called themselves.